Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Digital Edge podcast. And today we have another special guest, Reza Morkatabati. Thank you so much for joining us on, I think, an extremely interesting topic that we have. Software in businesses, buy versus build. And if you want to get started and introduce yourself, what you've worked on in the past a little bit and maybe what you're working on now.
Great. Thank you very much, Dominik, for having me in this show. And I've been watching it as much as I have been able to fit in, but very excited to be here. And hi, everybody. My name is Reza Morkatabati, and I would always start about my background as a badge of honor, especially these days, is I used to, my career started as an engineer, and that was one of the most fun parts about my career, that you build something, you see the results right away and such. But over time, I had aspirations about running my own company. So I started getting into business and got a business degree just to give myself a shot of good old fashioned education. And it was right around the dot-com era with all the things going on. And I guess my lesson learned from then was not in clear terms as I see it today, was you don't have to have great idea or the best idea to win in the market. It's really mostly you can be just a good enough idea, but it's about execution and operations. So after that, little by little in my career, I went the operations route. I've done sales operations, services operations, and I've done IT operations in particular in the last decade or so. I've run IT organizations, including my CIO role most recently for 5 years in a pretty large mid-sized company. So I come from operations background. I always remind people, and since my time as a CIO, I wanted to do something fun and something on my own. So I banded together with a few people that have been had worked with me in the past, and now we do our own consulting. We do business operations consulting, help people scale with use of technology, and of course AI.
Nice, very nice. Thank you for that intro. You started out with your experience. You called out how fun it was to be an engineer, to be on the ground, and to develop a product hands-on, right? And our topic today, for businesses, it's been an age-old question, right? When you acquire tools, software, to determine whether it's something that you want to buy or whether it's something that you want to build in-house. And I think, from back in the day, I used to develop software too. It was more of an option back in the day because there was less available software and you had to build your own way. And over time, there are a lot more commercial products with the internet available and so forth, right? And now I think the times have drastically changed again with AI capabilities. What's the current state of software development in the world of AI that you see?
I think it has been an amazing year or so in terms of building software. Whoever want to do it, can you do it? And this whole notion of vibe coding, which I actually hate that term. I think it is more than just about just vibing, thinking about something. All of a sudden, software appears. There's a lot more good old fashioned engineering that goes into there with AI,
Mhm.
of course. But I think it has been an incredible year or so where the market is moving more toward, especially starting with Anthropic, making bets on enterprise software development and building products that's specific to that. And the market is expanding, and the race is kind of becoming more between the front runners, a lot of the front runners like OpenAI and Anthropic, about the enterprise software development. And I use the enterprise, I don't mean to scare people off that it's only big or go home. Any of us these days can do these things. So it has become pretty, uh, 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 I wouldn't say easy, but very easy to test things out and try it on your own, even without the technical background and to do that. So it's very exciting times from that aspect.
Yeah, I think so too. Uh, I have been on the periphery a little bit of AI-driven software development over the past year or so, right? I had always developed a little bit small tools and things to help myself, right? And about a month ago, I said hey, let's put this theory to the test and see how far I can get. And actually went ahead and built a simple but fully functional iOS app
Yeah.
without being an iOS expert and going through that motion, right? So, and I'll release it in the next couple of weeks, probably once the App Store approves it, hopefully. But as a proof of concept of what is possible, it is incredible, right? Because I
Uh,
think you can, with basic, I should say, knowledge, plus your point about it having an understanding of engineering in software space, you can do a lot.
and I will give you a couple of examples along those lines. I did start with my background as an engineer, and I always had these kind of wonderful thoughts that if that always used to be the most exciting part of my career, I want to end my career towards and just to be a programmer. But then I had to learn about Python, which I know not very little about. How do you do AWS coding, things like that? Always scared me away. And now, to your point, I can sit in a coffee shop, and which I actually have done that. We are a consulting company, so we need to do time tracking. And I looked for software that does exactly what I wanted to do, and I couldn't find it. Now it took me like maybe half a day to do something like that. So it's super convenient to try things out and just do it exactly the way you want it. However, it's one thing for you and I to do it in our own setup and our own kind of
Mhm.
application. It's another one to kind of actually roll it out to hundreds or thousands of people in enterprise.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like, so how does a business leader now go and look at this field, right? Of like everybody's talking about, you can just crank out software. You don't need, I don't know, global teams anymore. Work weird hours and have these specialties. And maybe with one or two people, you can do a lot more. What does that mean though for a business to say, hey, instead of getting the off-the-shelf generic solution, I'm going to build my own that really fits the business for a reasonable cost? Then.
I think I'll break it down into three kind of tranches of conversation. You tell me which one you want to kind of start with. But number one is actually deciding on what applications would fit the best for this environment, depending on what size company you are. How do you make that decision about, well, this is the app I want to try? Second one is considerations that you need to have to say, for me to do this, these are the things I gotta know that I'm getting myself into. Am I ready to do that? And the third is, to your point at the end, I got the app. I know what I need to do. Am I able to actually do it or not? What are I mean, is it actually good for me to get into that business and
Mhm.
such? So I don't know where you want to start, but yeah.
I think maybe take us through the thought process, right? If you're a CEO who's got an IT organization and wants to be better aware of like what this ultimately means, right? Of course you consult with your team and you find out
Yeah.
what's going on, but at the bottom of it, right, how can you create that basic understanding of like asking the right questions and maybe challenging your CIO also to undertake different ways than in the past?
Yeah, so I will start from actually what types of application would fit in. Then, I mean, that's the first thing. Like, do you ask that for every application? I don't think that makes sense. So there are certain applications like CRM, for example, or your financial applications. They are there to serve a purpose that has been run
You
for a
don't
long
need to
time.
go build your own Salesforce app, basically.
And you know what? It's not necessary because you couldn't do a better job. It's because they have this defined infrastructure that there's an ecosystem of other things that tap into it, right? Doing it, replacing that, you're replacing the whole thing. So, plus there are rules and regulations for financial applications. No CFO would want to start from there. But it's that secondary layer of applications. So, usually to me, it comes down to asking, to look at it like, what is the source of value for that? Like, if somebody is saying, hey, I need this and I need this tomorrow, then you got to start like peeling that proverbial onion to say, what does that application do that actually makes it valuable to you, that you're going to get huge ROI out of it, right?
Mhm.
And to me, it boils down to usually two things. It's either the data or the user interface, the user experience, right? Data is does the application actually produce its own data or manages its own data? A lot of the Salesforce ecosystem, for example, they are built on top of Salesforce. They grab the data and then package it in a nice way and do something with it and then push it back, right? They don't generate data, but there are a lot of other applications that, like ticketing systems, they say, yeah, I help you manage and kind of create tickets and just do that. So that would be my first thing, because if it
Mhm.
is data, then you should have access to that, as much of an access as these applications through CLI, API, MCPs, and do the same thing. Usually, most of the times, these $50,000 to $200,000 applications is about workflows, right? Hey, I can do this in a nice way. It can get organized around this particular people. For example, Gainsight is a great example about customer success. And they say that's my source of value, that you don't have to figure that out. We know how to do it, and it's easy to manage that. You don't need any IT folks or developers to do that. It comes out of the box. Those are the ones that I think that we should be challenging and start looking into. Data I can get with all the technology. If it is about UX, there are two parts that you want to be sensitive about. One is I can with vibe coding and other things, not vibe coding, but like with Claude and everything, I can replicate something similar. But
Mhm.
number two is the UX, the way we are used to it, is that going to stick in the future or not? Is everything going to be done from Slack or from harnesses and those types of things? So that would be my area, is not the ones that generate the data, unique data, but the ones that source of value. That would be my first kind of a tranche. And then over time, I will go more deeper into that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? One thing that I've noticed in companies is that, software licenses have always been managed very tightly, right? Because you want to make sure you're not spending more money on software or anything that you really consume. And, one thing that's a little bit different, at least for now, is in the AI world, it's like the token consumption. It's almost a free for all,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so it's still, I think there's a value question of, hey, what are you gaining from a custom solution versus one that you get off the shelf, right? And I think there's something to be said about investing a little bit of time and energy to really quantify that, because I think we're maybe not only necessarily replacing the status quo, but are there opportunities out there to do better than what's in the market and potentially reduce costs even further, like from an operational standpoint, or even increase revenues as a result. Do you see that there's good frameworks to help companies to evaluate that, or does that come down to more of the organizational maturity, whether they can assess their business processes and opportunities well?
Well, so now we are kind of going to kind of more at at the last part of it, right? The first part, what applications. Second part would be, and we will get back to it, on capabilities that I need to actually make it happen. But the last part is, how do you pull these things together? You got to think
Mm,
about a company, somebody who's in the position to actually make that decision, because a lot of companies are not in that position. You don't have the right people, you don't have the skill sets, you
right.
don't have that capacity. You're like maturity level zero from like whatever that is. But let's say you do. This is where I think the word of CIO and the AI gonna converge, right? If the CIO organization was, I'm gonna prioritize these tools based on ROI, to your point, and whatever. Now you got the AI question as well. Well, forget about buying or whatever. Whether I buy or don't buy, reuse what I got. This is about building. These two should be one framework. Like, you're not prioritizing across organization. You're saying, finance wants this thing. Should we build or buy? That's your first question. And if it is building, what source of value it gives it? It's the same questions, but it's kind of said, if I build, it's going to take me 3 months, it's going to do this and it's going to do that. And then how I'm going to make sure that I got it, right? It's not,
Mhm.
this is not something, oh yeah, of course, I could do this thing, time tracking from a coffee shop in 3 hours. Enterprise app, this is not, I mean, I think that's what sometimes people feel about it. And that's not, I mean, let's not go there. Like, it's much more complicated. Can be, right? Depends on how much security and controls you want to implement in
Right,
the organization.
right. Yeah, yeah. Going to your other point about, say, the understanding of like what's it really going to take, you know, to say
Yeah.
like, hey, there's an opportunity there. Even you're spending a bunch of money on licenses, and you're like, hey, guys, go figure out if we can build this ourselves, right? What does an organization need to have in place to be able to actually undertake that? Then,
Perfect. This is that middle part is actually
yeah,
I don't think people give it much thought. Like to your point, a CEO who's under a lot of pressure from the board and others, show me results, and it's gonna say, go make it happen. Do I need to buy these things? Go just why can't you just build it? This is the stack that you have to worry about. Number one is, do you have dedicated resources, right? I see this all the time
yeah,
when you ask somebody, do you do anything about AI? Yes, we do. What do you do? Well, we have Chat GPT. Everyone can use it. Well, that's not using AI. Do you have anybody dedicated to do that? Oh, yeah, there is this person that runs sales ops for me. And we have asked her to also do some AI work.
right.
Innovation has to be intentional, right? You can't just kind of hope that, hey, Dominik has maybe 10 hours a week that maybe he can do, or maybe he doesn't, but
Yeah, and then he's
he's
busy
going to do
for
something.
2 weeks,
I
and
mean,
yeah, it didn't
yeah.
happen.
So,
Yeah,
so you have to have that boundary of people, like 3 people, 5 people, whatever, depending on your size of organization. I can do that. Do I have the capacity and skill sets to do it? Second is you need to think about the infrastructure, right? So we see this, right? Like, I mean, you hear it about the news. Boom, boom, boom. I need access to Salesforce. I need to access to NetSuite. I need to access to this because my boss said I need AI. So go ahead and do it. That's the hard part. That's where the friction happens, right? Because I can give access to people. I think you had an episode about it recently about agentic access, right? I can give you access, but what if you start going off and doing something totally different that it wasn't the intent? So you have to be very thoughtful about my data, access rights, that control layer. How do I kind of manage that? The third one is the cost. You said it, like these things cost money. And I'm not just talking about tokens. Like people usually think of, just tokens this, token that. Well, then the production costs as they become. But what about people that have to constantly monitor and kind of make it better, right? I mean, that's what you're replacing. I'm not paying the company to do that. I need to get it exactly right to what I want to do.
right.
And then lastly is an ownership, right? I mean, you got to have somebody that owns it internally. If it is a sales ops app, then that person's job is to make sure, hey, this is working, it is not working. This is how the user experience should be. These are internal costs that you don't have to pay the vendor, but you can control. On the other side of the ledger is you control security, access rights. Basically, your configuration is your code. You think about it, that's how exactly the app is going to behave exactly for your organization. That's the upside of it.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said, along those lines of, yeah, building something new is great, but most of the time and energy is spent in maintaining, keeping it alive, adjusting it for new requirements, and making sure that it meets needs, right? So the cost aspect, or sometimes also the interest from the team, right? The people building it, they want to build and go build the next thing. But then you have like the poor people who are staying behind and have to like fix stuff and enhance
Yeah,
things, which
yeah.
is much less glamorous, right?
Which is not a new problem. Like I bet amongst your listeners, you have a lot of folks that have experienced applications that the company built because engineering team had a few hours here and there. Yeah, we can do this, and they did. They will build the application, but they go to their day job, which is building products, right?
Right.
So now the applications is here, and IT is being asked to maintain it, and IT doesn't know how to do it, right? Like so, it's the same thing, but it's gonna be faster. And that's why I think, as I'm saying, you need some dedication of resources and understanding. This is not a yes or no now. It's a yes or no commitment over a period of time.
Yeah, and sounds like the what I see sometimes is like when there are good tools available and things are easy to do, all of a sudden you end up with like many half baked products and abandoned solutions, right? Which didn't get the time that you're talking about to
Yep,
be fully developed and fully maintained, and the next person will then start something from scratch, and before you know it, you
100%.
got 50 partially built apps that are not doing much, and you just wasted all this time along the way.
Which is actually a point to kind of emphasize, right? I think to your point, a lot of people take the shortcut to say, the people process side of things are very difficult. Let me just
Mm.
solve it with technology. Technology can hide it. Well, with AI, things move much faster, right? If you have a not so good process and role definitions, and you throw AI at it, it would hide it for a while, but it can scale the bad process
Right,
even worse, right?
right.
So, like deal desk, for example, if deal reviews are not exactly defined the way you want them, and there are unclarity over there, well, AI doesn't help you. It can help you kind of identify issues. So, it's actually a very important point, Dominic, you're bringing up. You don't just want to say, okay, I got this process, let me automate it. That's what the tool was going to do. You got to kind of spend time. That's what I was saying. You need an owner, somebody that says, what's the new process going to be? And that's what we're going to automate.
Yeah, I think invaluable to spend a little bit of time up front to think about it, to clarify where you are,
Yeah.
to clarify where you're going, and then figure out the engineering part of actually making that happen. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're approaching the end of our episode here, but super good to have you, Reza. Maybe to conclude, what would you say, or what would you tell our listeners, business leaders, what to look out for in this topic of buy versus build in consideration of the current state of AI and how we move forward?
I mean, you started the conversation with kind of similar lines of a question, and I want to kind of bring it back, right? If you're listening to this thing and says, "Oh, maybe I should be building stuff," you got to ask your question: what is the maturity of your organization? What is the state of AI here in your organization? Again, you, for example, as a CFO, being able to build something on your own, that doesn't mean that you're capable of doing these things internally. So I go back to my original premise and kind of a word of caution to people. If you don't have dedicated capacity, if you haven't really defined the strategy to how do you want to experiment with AI internally outside just to the chat model, you're already falling behind. So the word of caution is start experimenting, start dedicating some capacity. Otherwise, this is just going to be a conversations in hallways, never going to go anywhere. So get on that train right now. Otherwise, your competition is going to be way ahead of you on this thing.
All right, I think that's really, really good advice, right? The opportunity is great and the potential is there. And I'm very excited about where this goes, right? With human diligence and involvement along the way. Thank you,
Yes,
Reza.
100%.
Yeah, thank you, Reza, so much for joining us today. And thanks, everyone, for watching. Hope you got some good value out of this episode and maybe helps you with some important decision making of how the world is changing with these new capabilities that we have with AI and software. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.